Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to Civilized Pills. I'm your host, Jack, and I'm very excited to welcome our special guest for today's episode. Creative genius, a living legend of magic, creator of the most popular and best-selling products in the magic industry, one of the most gifted creator in the world of magic, and I have one more quote by June Horowitz, from the former president of the International Brotherhood of Magicians. I've been in magic my entire life, so I've seen a lot. And this is the best I ever seen. So please welcome Dan Harlan. Hello, Dan. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for your time again. I'm so happy that you're my guest in this episode. I've been a huge fan of your work since my childhood, and I want to start exactly with childhood, but not mine, of course, yours. Sorry if I'm roughly speaking, but I know that mostly you were raised in the theater.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, my family, my mother and father were very involved in community theater in our small town, and my dad was a semi-professional musician as well. So he used to go out pretty much every weekend and play with a band. But he was very active in writing music, writing productions, directing, starring in them, all of those kinds of things. And so when I was 2 years old, he had put together a big variety show, and it was kind of a celebration for the theater. So there were little pieces from all different kinds of shows all put together, and he needed a 2 year old kid to ride a tricycle on stage. He happened to have one. So that was my first job, was riding a tricycle across the stage, wearing a little beanie with a propeller on it, and I didn't know exactly what I was doing. I knew it was, really important and exciting and all of that kind of stuff, but it was just such a simple thing for me to do. So they just opened up a door on one side of the stage at the right time, and I rode as quick as I could across to the other side, and then somebody got me over there. Um, but the first time I did it, I'm riding across the stage, and I hear this large roar of applause and laughter, coming from this side. And I'm riding, and I'm like, what's going on? And then I get to the other side, and everybody's so happy about what I did that, I was immediately like, instead of being scared by it, I was excited by it. I thought it was great. I really loved it. I wanted to do it again. And I've always had that kind of enthusiasm for theater and for audiences. I love making an audience happy. Always remember that moment.
So you started your career as an actor?
Yes. Like I said, from that point on, I wanted to be involved in everything. So I started to get involved in any production that I could whenever they needed, a child actor to do it. So by the time I was, say, 6 or 7 years old, then I was getting lines and getting cast in anything where you had to sing and dance and talk and all of that. And so I was really involved in a lot of productions and learned a lot about on stage and backstage and the way everything got put together. I was always I was always a very aware and interested child, so I really wanted to learn as much as I possibly could. So I really got a good education over those years before I ever even learned my first magic trick.
Of course, magic and theater are very close art forms, but I'm interested in how you met your main passion, the art of magic. When did you first see a magician, and how did you start your journey into the magic world? Uh,
Yeah, well, so during that same time in my grade school, growing up in my elementary school, our principal was an amateur magician. Now, I didn't know that, but what I did know was that we had a lot of different acts that were touring around the country at that time. It was big business to do shows for schools, and so we saw at least two magicians a year, which is a lot more than most people would see in school now. And it was all because the principal had these connections with various people. But what I didn't think about was that magic was theater. It just didn't click for me. There were two different things. I thought magicians were magical. And so when I was about 9 years old, one of the counselors at the school taught me a magic trick, a rubber band trick. And that's when I realized, wow, if I could learn a magic trick, that then this must be, they must be doing the same kind of illusions. And also, one of my classmates performed a one ahead billet style reading. He was 9 also, so it wasn't all that fancy. But I asked him where he learned that, and he said he read it in a book in the library. So I immediately went to the library and I read every book on magic that I could find at the school library. Then I went to the library in our city and I read all of those books, and I just started learning everything I could about magic. It was my way of producing theater on my own. So since I already understood the principles of theater as well as I could as a child, I realized that I could write my own lines, I could build my own props, I could make up my own stories and do everything on my own.
When did you perform your first magic show? About 12 years old or 13? Or...
About a year later, no, I was about 10 years old when I performed my first magic show. I did it for 4 of my friends. Wait, it might have been, actually it might have been when I was 12. So 10 would have been in the fourth grade. I did a talent show when I was 10. So a talent show for the school when I was 10 years old. My dad helped me build a bunch of props and things like that. And then my first paid show was when I was 12 years old, and I did it for 4 of my friends. And I charged each of them 10 cents each. I don't know if you know how little that is. But yeah, it was a successful show, but I didn't make much money on it. But later that same year, I put a show on in my basement to raise money for a charity, and that went pretty well. I didn't raise a lot, like $100, which at that time was pretty big money for me.
Besides that, you already were a professional magician at a very early age. Later, you became a professional graphic designer. Yes?
Yes. So that was what my entire life, actually, concurrent with being involved in theater. I've always been an artist. So I really learned to draw, very young, about 4 or 5 years old. I was drawing in perspective, which is unusual for a child of that age. I was able to capture things three-dimensionally, and I understood all of that. And so I really, really wanted to do as much art as I could, but I didn't want to be, a fine artist, because it's hard to make a living as a fine artist. The whole idea of the starving artist is true. Um, but I did have some nice showings of some fine art that I created and that kind of thing. So when I left from college, the one of the easiest things for me to do was to find a job in graphic design. So graphic design, they're always looking for people with a good eye on how to do things, and so I became a graphic designer and did that as my full-time career until 1992, which is when I invented Cartoon. So I was making money as a graphic designer during the day, and then in the evenings and weekends, I was making money as a magician. And I was also lecturing a little bit, like I would do a little bit of a lecture tour. But then when I invented Cartoon, I didn't need to be a graphic designer anymore. you know, I, I could go full time into magic. So it really helped me that became a success.
I want to return to the art of magic. And the most common misconception about this art form among many regular audiences is that this art is only based on lies.
Mhm.
So we all know that every art form is some kind of fiction. Yes. What do you think
That's right. Yep.
about how
Yep.
magic became most unreliable and dishonest art among other art forms? Because even today, in many people's minds, when they hear the word magician or illusionist, They imagine some kind of professional liar or icon of conman.
So there are many reasons why that happened. The main reason for that is the origin of magic was long before the audience was able to distinguish between what was real and what wasn't real. Magic started way off in the early days with rituals and shamanic ceremonies and other cultural tribal kinds of things where a magician was revered, and they weren't even doing like magic tricks at the time. They were revered for being able to act like an animal, for example, like to really become an animal, those kinds of things. So when the first like magic tricks started to come in, it was it was when these priests, these shamans, the original magicians started to understand perception and use people's perception to give them a magical or transformative experience. So it was real, but it has to develop beyond that. So as it developed beyond that and became, more of an entertainment exercise, it was still perceived as being real, and they were still keeping, as much mystery about everything as they possibly could. But that became harder and harder and harder to do, up to the point where people were so upset by the deception that they accused these magicians of being real and using witchcraft and started to kill them. So let's hope it doesn't get to that point again. Now, past that, then magic started to become a little bit more exposed to the public, and the public was allowed in a little bit more so that it became an entertainment. Now, those origins aren't that long ago. The origin of the magic as entertainment is much shorter than theater as entertainment. Theater as entertainment has thousands of years of history. Magic as entertainment has hundreds of years, about 500 roughly, of magic being an entertainment. And so it's still going through some growing pains of changing over from being, completely real to being a theatrical art. And so we still have trappings of reality. It's the thing that we've been talking about that are in magic, because it's hard to let go of making it as real as possible. And I'm not opposed to, things like people trying to get it to be real and be perceived when they're doing things that harken to like those older times. For example, Dynamo walking on the river, walking on water. He wanted to present that in a way where it felt real, and it did. It looked real, and all the filming on it was very realistic, as though it was just caught and not planned, and all this kind of stuff. So that's fun, right? But you still get that problem. How can you balance the fiction with the reality when you have to deal with the public directly, and they're much more educated about the fact that there's deception involved? So that's what I was saying, is exactly why it's important now that we have subjects that resonate with people on a personal level. If you think about what I do, my best work, because not all of my work is of this height, but my best work, I can just tell the story.
As you mentioned, some magicians want to present magic as real magic, as real stuff, as if they have some kind of real powers, or want to blur the lines. But there's always an issue, because the audience always has a legitimate and honest questions. For example, why does someone want to link one ring with another? What's the purpose?
Yes, right. And that's an issue. If you had real powers, let's say that you had a real power, and let's take Uri Geller as an example. So his most famous real power is the ability to bend metal with his mind, especially spoons. Okay, that's the dumb part, right? He can bend metal with his mind as long as he touches it, and as long as it's a spoon, and as long as it's not too thick. See, that's the problem, is that even what he does is really dumb as an actual power, and his use of it is dumb too. What I mean, can't he think of any instance where bending metal might actually be helpful? Isn't there some place in the world where it would make sense to be able to bend metal with your mind, or in any way? Let's say that I had a couple of papers, 2 sheets of paper and a staple, and I wanted him to staple the 2 pieces of paper together with his mind. That staple is much weaker than a spoon, and he has the power to bend metal with his mind. I'll even push it through the paper, and all I want him to do is to bend the legs of that staple down for me, because I can't find my stapler. Uri, staple my paper, please. So it can always be disproven by the dumbest thing. But even people who apparently have these real powers, like reading people's minds, for example, is a great example. Isn't there a better use for that? Wouldn't there be some practical use for being able to read people's minds? Wouldn't you be able to discover things that, prevent crimes, for example, or do anything? I mean, it's the stuff. See, whenever they fictionalize a mentalist on a TV program like The Mentalist, they're always doing something useful. They're, they might put on a show, but then they do something useful, because people who write drama, who write entertainment, they understand that there is a structure to it, that you have to establish something, you have to create a conflict, you have to resolve those conflicts. There's a reason why things are written that way. So people who read minds ought to be able to do something useful with that. And the worst one of all, if you can predict the future, why haven't you? Right? Why haven't you really predicted something that matters? There's always that issue with it. And now, as a magician, I also do mentalism, but as a magician, yeah, obviously, why am I linking rings together? Why am I tearing up a piece of paper and restoring it, or in my case, transforming it? All of those questions are questions that I think are very, very important to ask and to answer. Answering them for most magicians and mentalists is the challenge. But I will tell you this, the best answers are the ones that resonate with people in their everyday lives. They're about being able to tell a very short kind of a story encapsulated in a single moment that explains a purpose-driven, a premise behind the whole thing. And I give lectures and classes and all of that kind of stuff on how to develop a script structure for stories. I have writing on that. There's also videos available through Penguin Magic that I've talked about that as well. And I happen to also be writing my Masterworks project, which is 3 major books over the next 6 years.
Before we get to your Masterworks, I want to tell our listeners that in your early career, you covered almost every genre of magic in your various DVD series. But lately you covered the whole Tarbell Course in magic. For those who don't know what it is, it's the Bible of magic, written by Harlan Tarbell.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, how did you do that? Tarbell Course in Magic is a notable encyclopedia that was first published in 1926, and it has 8 volumes.
Mm-hmm.
And what you have done is real magic for me.
Yeah, well,
You
right.
made more than 100 DVDs. So how did you do this kind of gigantic work? And the second question is, where your unique ideas come from as a creator?
Hmm. Yeah. So, as far as being able to cover Tarbell, there are a couple of things that are working at the same time there. One of them is to understand workflow, how to get a lot of work done in a short period of time. And so for that, I've got experience putting together some live shows, but I also have experience putting together some things for television and some things for video. And you have to establish a process that works for just about everything. So when you look at Tarbell, you've got all of these pieces. Every single routine is a separate piece. And if you have a process that works where you can do it quickly for one piece that you can apply to a next and next and next and next and next, then you're way ahead of the game. Everything's got the same process. And the process is, I won't give every single step to the process, but the basic idea of the process is to figure out what the core method is. How is this done? We're going to start with the structure of what physically has to happen. So how is it done? And is that a good way to accomplish it? And then what are the props? Do those props have any inherent meaning? So we build out from what has to be done with the props to what the props are until we know physically what actions have to take place. And then you put all of the other meaning onto those actions. So, why you ask that question, why would I do this with those props? Do I need to change some of the props? Do I need to change some of the method? I have to come up with a reason why I'm doing it. Then you write the script on that. And then you go into the editing phase where you use the three stages of storytelling to establish what you're doing, to bring everybody through the major action, to create a conflict, and to resolve the conflict at the end. That's the process, and that gets applied to every single thing. So I can take any item, and it doesn't matter. I could do it with anything now. It doesn't matter what it is, and design a really good magic trick in about a half an hour. So that's where you have to think about this, because you have to be able to design a good concept for the magic trick in about a half an hour, and that's roughed out. And then you can devote the time to actually polishing it and rehearsing it and getting it ready for the show. Because I had to do about 6 new tricks every week. So I really had to develop those, because I also, in addition to just coming up with what they were going to be, ultimately, I also made them. So I needed a couple of days to physically make all of the props and put them together and build them and test them and make and decorate them, and sometimes costumes and music. So I had 2 full days of tech, of building and tech that I would do. So 2 other days would be creating the effects, then building and teching the effects for the next 2 days, and then 2 days of rehearsing them, and then the actual performance. So the whole process repeated week after week after week. And actually, there was 1 day off during the week. So I really had 1 day to rehearse and get them ready, and then I took a day off. Day off actually happened after the performance. Day off, roughing everything out, building everything, rehearsing everything, then performing. So yeah, it's a heck of a structure to stick to for 5 years. That's how long it took me to get through the whole thing, was 5 years. Now, the other part of your question is, where do the ideas come from? Well, the ideas, to me, are not the tricks themselves. They're not the thing that I just talked about. They're not the how it works or what you're doing it with. The idea is the scripting part. It's where you decide what it's about. And those are just brainstorming. Sometimes they're easy, sometimes they're not. Generally speaking, though, you can think about what the trick looks like to an audience with absolutely no scripting to it. So it doesn't matter what the trick is. You just visualize it from an audience's perspective. What happens during the trick? So I'm trying to think of well, actually, let's use Starkle as a good example because everybody knows where I eventually ended up with that one. But when you think about what happens from an audience's perspective, very simple. There's a square piece of paper folded up. It's torn into two pieces. One of those pieces is opened, and you can see a circular opening in it. The other piece is opened, and it's shaped like a star. So that's what happens as far as an audience is concerned. They don't see any ditching. They don't see any of that kind of stuff. So you don't have to talk about mechanically method. You don't have to talk about anything else except what they see. So you start there. And then what you want to do is you want to ask yourself, well, is there any symbolism? And that's an easy one because there's already symbolism in that trick. So that's why it's an easy one to talk about because very often it's hard to know if there's symbolism and you have to think more about it. But that one, it's blatant. There's a star, there's a circle. Okay. Those can symbolize lots of different things. You automatically have plenty of opportunity there. And I've got alternate presentations for it. I've got a werewolf presentation with it. I've got ESP presentation. I've got a TV star presentation. There's all kinds of things that go along with that idea. Okay, so now you write down what that symbolism is, and then you say, is there anything that is real that also is that symbolic? So yes, they can symbolize lots of things, but what are the real things? And that's where the idea of the moon and the stars comes from. It's really easy in this case, moon and stars, done. Those are real things. But how do we connect that to people? There's many different ways to connect it to people, but I'll save you time. I'll get right to it. The moon in many cultures symbolizes the mother. So that's where the whole story comes from, my mother and I. It was very easy because now I don't have to think of, how do I connect these things? They're already connected in my mind and in many people's minds. So I can start the story in a very, very easy way. And then the rest of it just scripts out and develops.
And of course, I want to talk about your latest project, Masterworks, as you earlier mentioned, and some more details about this. It's possible, of course.
Yeah. So the Masterworks project is a big project, but it's about time that I do it. In fact, I think I have to do it now, or I'll never get a chance to do it. So what it is I'm going all the way back to the very beginning for me, and I'm taking 18 years in 3 sections of my career. So the first 18 years, the middle 18 years, and this current 18 years. We're in the last couple of those current 18 years. And I'm writing everything that I created and thought of that I think makes an impact for Magic in these 3 books. So each book will be about 300 to 400 pages long, and each one will detail what I developed during that time. And they'll be published. So the first one will be published by the end of next year. So about a year and a half or longer from now. It's a little bit longer than that. So I'm currently working on that first book. And then the second book will take 2 years, and the third book will take 2 years. So like I said, if anybody's interested, what you can do is you can subscribe to the books. And what that gives you is that periodically I will be sending out updates on my progress in the form of like PDFs of actual pages from the book. So you won't have to wait 2 years to start seeing the book. You subscribe and you'll get regular updates. You won't get the whole book until it's published, and the updates won't be in the order that the book is in. I mean, I don't want people to anticipate that they can take these pages and just put them in a 3-ring binder and have a book. It's not going to be that simple. But I do want people, instead of doing a pre-order where you have to wait 2 years to see anything, I do want people that support this project to get something out of it. So you go to themystictower.com, look for my Masterworks, you can subscribe there.
What do you think are the most important things that modern audiences can learn from the art of magic?
Yeah, do we want our lay audience to learn
Yes, I
something
mean
from magic?
non-magicians, regular audiences. Yes.
Yeah. So okay. I do that in my show. What I want them to learn, and they learn it from my show. It's just what I had mentioned before, but I think it's very important. I want them to learn that that magic is an experience that happens to all of us. That we have magical, transformative moments in our lives that we feel. It's a feeling that we get. It's an emotion, and it's deeply tied to emotions. So the emotion of surprise is very similar to the emotion of fear. It brings up both of those things. I didn't know if you knew that, but when people are surprised by something, they are frightened. That's the first thing that happens. So let's say you plan a surprise party for somebody, they walk in, everybody else, surprise. First reaction that person has is fear, and then they relax from that. So when you surprise somebody, you are frightening them, and then it's because they know that there's no fear anymore. Then they have a sense of disorientation, followed by familiarity. They latch on to things that are familiar. Then they are filled with relief. So it's very, very fast succession of those things. But because of it, it's a very strong sense of, oh, familiar, relieved, I'm safe. Okay. So that is the sense of wonder arc. Okay. Now, that's for like shocking, surprising things. Very similar when you have a magic trick that's unexpected. They're not quite frightened, but they are unsettled. Like nothing feels right for just a moment. Like they 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 lose their sense of concept of what is real and what is not real for just a moment, and then they're disoriented. Then they look for familiarity. Then they feel safe. Okay, so those stages are not fun. If it happens to somebody for real, like outside of a magic trick, I'll give you an example. You're driving your car along, no problem, nothing bad's happening or whatever like that, and then and then all of a sudden, a a car swerves out in front of you and puts on its brakes, and you're able to stop. That's what it feels like when you realize that a magic trick has happened. And it's especially important to think about it this way. You're driving along your car and you drop something. You go to pick it up, and when you come back, there's a car stopping in front of you. That's exactly what it feels like for a good magic trick to happen. That car just appeared and is stopping. And everything, and you're like, oh, okay. And you check everything, and you're like, okay, good, I'm safe. No problem at all. Okay. So
So is this
what
some
we
kind of
need to
training
do,
field for the mind?
here's what I'm getting to. I know there's a lot to say, but all that to say this. What we need to do as magicians to educate our audiences is for them not to be scared or unsettled without us.
Have you ever had mystical incidents in your life and had no clue how this kind of thing happened? Not magic tricks, of course. I mean weird experiences
Yeah.
which happened in your life.
Magical or strange experiences that
Yes,
have
some
happened to
kind of
me.
strange and mysterious things.
Yeah. Now, I'm a big skeptic because I've done a lot of study of strange experiences and about why people think the way
If I correctly
and
remember, you were in Matt Shermer's documentary.
the skeptics show with him, which I just did some con artist work on that, but we could have talked about the other things. But here, like this book, the 7 Laws of Magical Thinking. It's a great book that goes into, and it's by, in case somebody wants, it's Matthew Hudson's name right there. If somebody wants to, a quick, easy read, I consider it easy, about why people believe in magical things. and why it's important for us to. It's from a skeptic's perspective. It breaks down, magical experiences and magical thinking and the truth behind them. Okay, so there are still things that happen that can't be explained technically. Most of them are coincidences. I give you just a very simple example of a coincidence from early on in my life. I was at the community theater. I was probably 14 years old or something like that, and we were doing a production of Oliver. I don't know if you know the musical Oliver. It's a Charles Dickens tale, but there are a lot of kids in it. There's orphans, in the cast, a lot of them. So there's like 20 kids in this cast, and so we're all just kind of hanging out, waiting. We're in the lobby waiting for rehearsals. We're in rehearsals, so we're not doing the show yet. And one of the girls in the cast said, does anybody have any gum? And I happen to have a pack of gum with me in my pocket, right? Now, I was a magician at the time. So instead of going, I've got gum, right? I put my hands into my pocket and I took them back out and I had palmed the gum like that. So I said, I don't know. What's your favorite kind of gum? So I asked her favorite kind of gum and she named what was palmed in my hand. And I said, all right, I can do that. And then boom, and I produced it and gave it to her. Okay. So that's a coincidence, right? Not that magical of an experience, but it's one that I can start out with to explain to you that I did have that feeling of, oh my God, did I make her name that? Or was it just a coincidence? Now, I mean, there's 20 different kinds of gum, so, it's a narrow thing, but she didn't have to have named that. And often when I tell that story, people ask me, well, what were you planning on doing? And what I was planning on doing I was planning on saying, well, I don't have that kind, but I have my favorite, and then producing my favorite and giving it. And that's it. Okay. And it would have just been a cute little trick. But because she named what I had before I produced it, it was magic for real for her and me at the same time. So that's one. Okay. But it's just a coincidence. Now, that same kind of coincidence has happened to me many, many times in my life for having people name cards or pick a color on a hot rod or whatever. Anytime there's a small enough selection, you can often get a hit. So I don't have that same feeling. I always have an out for it, but it's great when that hits. Now let's talk about something else. So outside of magic, because that kind of coincidence is going to happen to magicians all the time, is for them to know, be ready for it. Don't feel like it's too magical, but enjoy it. Okay. I saw a UFO when I was a kid. I was about 17, and I was out, just night watching. I was actually out there with my dad, and we were watching the sky, and there was a light, just a light, bigger than a star, but you could have thought that it was an airplane, but it wasn't blinking, didn't have any of that. It was just a light, and it was moving. So I thought, oh, there's a shooting star, a meteor. But it went across the sky and then turned and went that like sharp turn and went off in another direction and disappeared. So that, generally speaking, doesn't happen. So I don't have an explanation for what that was. So there's one for you. And let's see. That's really the biggest one. That one sighting of a UFO. Everything else that ever happened to me that was in any way kind of weird or magical has a very logical explanation to it. And even that one does. I just don't know what the explanation is.
You already mentioned your attitude about skepticism. I also have the same. And maybe you also know people who like crystals and some kind of shamanistic things.
Yeah.
And interestingly, some of them say, oh, I know it's not real. I'm not Stone Aged man. I'm civilized, but it really helps me on some level. And it works for me. Maybe when it works, it's some kind of placebo or mesmer thing, but I don't think it's a classical placebo because they consciously know that those kind of things do not have real powers. But they say it helps them even
Hmm.
if they don't believe in it. So,
Yeah,
what do
yeah, I
you
know.
think
Okay,
about
so
this?
I will tell you that I absolutely respect that attitude uh, because uh, because I think that that's an attitude that people who are uh, healthy members of our society have developed about everything. Okay, so here's where I see the difference. If somebody believes in the healing power of crystals, and they believe that the crystal itself heals them, they are wrong and they are fooling themselves. There is no evidence whatsoever, and there have been multiple tests that disprove it. Crystals are crystals. They do not have any actual healing power. They have power to do other things. A quartz crystal, has the power to help us tell time, for example. It vibrates at a certain frequency, but that frequency is so high and so little that it's not affecting you directly. However, if you know that the crystal itself isn't magical, but you like the idea of a crystal that has a vibration, and it makes you think, I also have a vibration. There's a certain energy about everything in the world. There's this connectedness, and it's pretty, and it makes me feel good, and I can wear it on a necklace, and think about all the time, like that crystal's part of the earth. I'm part of the earth. There are these connections. There are these meanings. There's this deeper significance to all of this. Then yes, that is a great attitude, and that is a good psychological tool to keep yourself focused on positive things that you can do for the world and do for yourself. The biggest transformation that you can make to the world is to transform yourself. That is where it starts. If you want the world to change, you change first. you make the change from within that you want the world to be. And if we all did that, we would make a big impact. And people do that all the time. I do that. Now, the reason I say that people with healthy minds do this all the time is, I mean, we we give that same kind of meaning, that same kind of magical meaning that you might give to a crystal or to some other talisman. We give that same magical meaning to jewelry. We give that same magical meaning to clothing. We give that same magical meaning to our possessions, such as an LP, hanging on the wall. It's not serving its purpose on your wall, but it serves another purpose. It has meaning to you. When you look at it, it means something. When you put on particular clothes, it means something. Every time that you groom yourself, that you shave, it has meaning. All appearances make a difference to attitudes because it makes us feel better about ourselves and the world and the way we present ourselves to the world. So that's where the magic in objects actually comes from. It comes from our mind perceiving them as being more than just the object they are.
What do you think are the most important and essential illusions that modern civilization needs as a society?
Oh, so yes. So, okay. Well, modern civilization, society, let's call it, is is an illusion. So the whole organization of civilization and society is an illusion, um, but it's one that's perpetuated by some very important things. So the important illusions that perpetuate society are manners, politeness, friendliness, being able to converse and get along with people, whether you like them or you don't like them. That is civilization. Being civilized is the illusion that helps us to have a society. So that's number one. Number two, rules. Rules are an illusion. They're an institution. They're arbitrary and put in place, and you can examine every single one of those rules. But rules are important for order. Now, order it combats chaos, but it also controls creativity. So you have to be very careful about which rules are the important rules, and especially when it comes to a creative endeavor. So, so the kind of rules that I'm talking about are like socially agreed upon rules that people have, and they change all the time. And then actual laws that protect people, protection laws, not that limit people. Laws that limit people, they sometimes protect people as well. They're all important. They're all, put in place somewhat arbitrarily and enforced arbitrarily. So the illusion there is the illusion of law and order. We know that that breaks down quickly, under certain circumstances, and it's sad when it does, but that's the thing that holds civilization together. So I think it's important that we respect those laws and those rules that protect people and that help us to get along in civilized ways. And those do change from time to time. I mean, it used to be when I was growing up. I mean, you called everyone sir or ma'am. We don't. That one's pretty much gone, but that was a rule. If you didn't do it, and it didn't matter what age you were, you just did that. You were that polite to everyone, but we don't do that anymore. I still do it every once in a while, because if I don't know somebody's name, I'll refer to them in a nice way. So that's an important one to hold together, like I said. But on the other hand, I was talking about creative endeavors. There are technically no rules when it comes to theater and art, but there are established concepts, and those rules are based on those established concepts. So when I talk about the story arc and those kinds of things, and establishing the premise and moving through conflicts and all of that's your standard approach to a story. And there are rules that are built into how you construct that and how you build that story. But it's possible to break those rules and still make something that's meaningful. It's going to be harder. It's going to be unusual. It's going to be avant-garde. It's not going to necessarily, be everybody's interest. So those are things that are important, but can be messed around with as long as you know what you're doing. When it comes to creating something, you often want to break the rules just so you can put everything back together again and make it into something new. There's one, and you were asked about important illusions for our society, and the third thing that I want to mention, that I think one of the important illusions is not the most important. The two that I've said are important, but the third illusion is money. So money is very important for the operations of society because it does help us try to equalize everything. Of course, it's manipulated at every stage by everybody that comes in contact with it. It's devalued, it's overvalued. There's comparisons, there's exchange rates, there's all that kind of stuff. Now it's becoming more homogenous because of electronic exchanges and currency and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit easier to deal with than it was in the past. But that also brings us closer to an illusion because there's a lot less actual currency. Even when there was currency, it's still an illusion because it's not actually worth what is printed on it or stamped on it for coins. It's only because we say it's worth that, your money would be worth nothing. And it's closer to that now because electronically, even if the banks don't collapse, if the internet collapses, if we lose, we all know how we can't access our really, really bad. And it'll probably happen sometime. Who knows when? I'm not a doomsday believer, and I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there is a good chance that there will be problems with dealing with currency electronically. But currency itself, that it has this amount of value compared to these goods and services. And that's very important for society to operate on that premise. So that's it. I'm sure there are a bunch of other ones, but those are big illusions.
I'm very interested in things, maybe very, very small ones, which provoke the biggest transformations in you and your life.
Oh, little things that have transformed me. Yeah. So there have been a lot of them along the way. Let's talk about some of the most recent ones. And the biggest transformation for me that's happened, what I call recently, would have been 15 years ago. 15 years ago was when Penguin Magic asked me if I would be the host of their lecture series. They were hesitant to approach me because they figured I was too busy and I would say no. And the truth is, I was busy, but it was a dream job for me. So when they asked me, I said, absolutely. I couldn't think of anything that I'd actually rather do. I loved the idea from the very beginning. I've always been a big fan of magic as well as a magician. I already knew a lot of the people that I would be coming in, and I was excited to meet some new people. So I jumped at the opportunity. I said, absolutely, please, I definitely want to do this. I didn't know for how long I was going to do it, but I knew I wanted to do it. And that made a big difference. That transformed my persona. That allowed people in magic to get to know me more off stage, and more for real, and see another side of me that probably most people didn't even know that I actually cared that much about magic. They know I created magic and I was fun and I performed a lot and I lectured on my stuff or whatever, but they probably had no idea that I actually knew a little bit more, and was friends with all of these people and all that kind of stuff. It was really nice. It was a great chance for me to be more real, to be more just honest with everybody. But it also afforded me that opportunity to talk directly with Penguin Magic, since I was there and I was working one day a week, basically. What was I going to do for the rest of the time? And that allowed me to pitch for them the Tarbell project. It allowed me to put a bunch of other stuff out. But the Tarbell project was something I'd been wanting to do for years. And so that made a huge difference for me, because I really wanted to show how my process can work for anybody and how it can pay off in a big way, and how you can take anything, doesn't matter what it is, and turn it into something that modern audiences will enjoy. So that was huge. And then, when COVID hit, that was a problem. We had to kind of shut everything down. And shortly into that, my life partner at the time was involved in a car accident, and she passed away. So that was not a small thing. That was a major thing that transformed me. And that happened during the lockdown, and that happened in 2020. So not that long ago. So 3 years ago, basically. So that hit really hard. We were all in isolation, and now this tragic event strikes me. So I really wasn't sure, what I was going to do, and when the world was going to open up again. And I wasn't involved in the Tarbell project anymore, so there wasn't a whole lot for me to do. So I kind of went a little stir crazy, but people were very nice and supportive and wonderful during that whole time. I loved that, but it really kind of let me take stock of my life and figure out, what is it that I am going to do? How am I going to be independent again? That's the hard part. So I eventually picked myself up and figured out I better get back to work. So I got back to work and got back involved in things. And fortunately, I did meet someone else. So I am involved now with my new life accomplice, who is going to be, as far as I can tell, she is the one for the rest of my life, which is going to be awesome. And I am now back to, as you see, I'm on my own, no longer working for Penguin Magic. I still work with them on occasion, but I'm now producing my life's work. So that's how I got to here, was through that series of transformations that happened to me over the course of the past 15 years. There's been some really great times and there's been some really sad times, but that is the way life goes, isn't it? If you're really living a life, you've got to be able to continue living it with good and with bad, and make the best out of every situation if you can. So hopefully that's not too sad or maudlin, but it is what happened to me. And if I can survive it, I think anybody can survive it. We can't anticipate when tragedy will strike us, but tragedy does not have to stop us. We can still grow. Mhm.
And I have a very trivial question about recommendations. Three books, three films.
Three books. Three books, three films. Okay, so I already recommended one, and this I still recommend this. So the definitely and that is a very magical book. Now I don't have it here because I was reading it in the car. No, I wasn't driving while I was reading it, but so that's out in the car. Is It's Edwin the Magician. It's a very obscure book. Edwin the Magician. It's about the guy that started Supreme Magic in England and his kind of career. I think his name was Edwin Hopper or Hooper. I can't remember exactly offhand right now. But it's a great book because he, by his own admission, wasn't necessarily the most creative or original guy. Didn't have a lot of money. Built all kinds of things himself. But he just had a real drive to entertain. It also tells some stories of him. He tells the stories of his career and weird things that happened to him along the way, which I absolutely love. You don't see many books like that. In fact, my books are sort of patterned after it. You're going to get the tricks and the routines, but I'm also going to tell you these really fun, quick anecdotes of things that have happened. Um, and so I like that. It's one that's hard to get, but maybe you have it in your library and haven't read it for a while. It's worth leafing through it and giving it a try. Let's see. What else can I recommend? It's always hard to just recommend like three things. It's a big challenge. I I could reach back here and take any one of these. Honestly, these are all like fantastic books that I'm looking through them. Maybe no, I don't even think I could just pull one. I'll tell you what I will do. I'll recommend an author, not a book. I'll recommend an author, and of course you've heard of him. Most people have. Martin Gardner. So Martin Gardner has his own section. It's like all of these books in here, right there. So Martin Gardner, was a writer on recreational mathematics, and that may not sound that fun. And for a lot of people, some of the things are not that easy to read, but some are. Some are very easy to read. But he was also an amateur magician, and so very often there's some magic worked in there. But even when there wasn't magic worked into it, the mathematical concepts are really interesting and can be applied to magic. And a lot of the stuff that I've done, I took, the math ideas from there and then hid that mathematics in some way. So they're really, really interesting to read. You can give any one of his books a chance to go. I uh, like this one as a quick, easy read. It's called The Unexpected Hanging. So the unexpected hanging is all about kind of logic problems. There are many, and they're short pieces to read in there. So Martin Gardner, The Unexpected Hanging might be a nice place to start, but any one of his books would be fun. Okay, so as far as like movies, TV shows, and things like that, um, there are some there's just so much that's available out there on streaming services now. What I recommend isn't necessarily a particular genre or a particular show, although there are some really great ones that I think pretty much everybody has seen them. But if you haven't seen them, you should go back and you should see Game of Thrones, you should see Black Sails, you should see Breaking Bad. The reason I mentioned those is because of the through line of the stories. They're in three basically different genres, three basically different times, even a different world for one of them, and so it's what happens from episode to episode, and the production values and the acting quality and the script quality, consistently high quality on every level for all of them. And those are productions that took years of time So it's going to, if you haven't watched any one of those three, you're going to have plenty of entertainment, but also a learning experience, because you should kind of watch these things, anything that you're watching, with a critical eye, and think about, how did they create this whole world, and think about the script and how much drama and intrigue is developed, and how the characters change and develop over time. There's so much to learn from it, that if you can even just get a tiny bit of that into any of your magic pieces, just any little bit, just a decorative piece or a costuming piece, or one line of script that's anywhere as good, it's going to improve what you do as a performer, as an entertainer. Uh, there you go. There's a few things.
Thank you again for the great conversation.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. It was real fun for me to have this chance, and thank you so much again for inviting me.
Thanks again.
You're welcome. Well, I'll see you later.
See you later.
Bye now.
Bye.